Hello, dear YouTube viewers, I hope you're doing well. Okay, so let's start our video. Ethan, a 29-year-old graphic designer, lived with his girlfriend Sophie, a 27-year-old marketing executive. They had been together for almost 3 years and recently moved into a cozy apartment in the city, a space filled with laughter, late-night talks, and shared dreams of the future. Everything about their relationship seemed steady from the outside. Morning coffees before work, weekend movie marathons, spontaneous dinner dates, and the kind of comfort that comes only from knowing someone deeply. Ethan often thought about proposing soon. He had even begun saving for a ring, imagining how Sophie's eyes would light up when he asked her to marry him. But lately, something about her had changed, something subtle, yet impossible to ignore. She had started spending more time on her phone, her screen turned away when he walked by. She laughed at messages she wouldn't explain, calling them just memes from friends. Her nights out with her girlfriends had become more frequent, and she always seemed excited, yet strangely defensive whenever Ethan asked where she was going. One evening, while folding laundry, Ethan found a piece of delicate lingerie he had never seen before. It wasn't her usual style. It was new, bold, and expensive. When he asked about it, Sophie smiled and said it was just a random gift from a friend. He wanted to believe her, but something in her tone didn't sound right. Even her scent was different. The perfume she used to wear, soft and familiar, had been replaced with something new, stronger, almost intoxicating. The way she moved around him also shifted. Her hugs felt shorter, her conversations distracted. Ethan tried to brush off his doubts. Maybe she was just stressed from work. Maybe she was trying to reinvent herself. He reminded himself not to become paranoid. After all, trust was the foundation of love. But deep down, an uneasy feeling began to grow. It whispered to him late at night when he lay awake beside her, listening to her soft breathing, wondering who she truly was when he wasn't around. Then came that Friday night, the night that would change everything. Sophie was getting ready for another outing with her friends, laughing to herself as she tried on dresses. Ethan sat quietly in the living room, sipping coffee, unaware that he was only minutes away from hearing something that would shake his world forever. Sophie had been excited all week about a night out with her friends. She called it a show, some kind of concert they had planned for weeks. As the evening arrived, she was full of energy, moving around the apartment with music playing from her phone, humming as she picked out clothes. She tried on 2 or 3 dresses before settling on a new one Ethan had never seen before, a sleek black outfit that hugged her figure perfectly. Her makeup shimmered softly under the light, and her perfume filled the room with a sweet, unfamiliar scent. Ethan sat quietly in the living room, pretending to focus on his laptop while she got ready in the bedroom. Every now and then, he glanced toward the doorway, admiring her beauty but also sensing something distant in her demeanor. She seemed different, confident, radiant, almost glowing, but not in the way she used to glow for him. After a few minutes, he heard her phone buzz. She answered immediately, her tone light and playful. Ethan didn't think much of it at first. Sophie often chatted with her friends before going out, making plans or laughing about inside jokes. But this time, her voice sounded softer, more private, like she was speaking to someone she didn't want him to hear. He turned down the volume on his laptop and listened unconsciously. He caught fragments, a small laugh, a teasing tone, and then the words that froze him completely. Haha, don't worry. I got a full-body surprise waiting. The laughter that followed sent a chill down his spine. He knew that voice. It wasn't the kind of laugh Sophie used with her friends. There was something suggestive in it, something intimate that didn't belong in casual conversation. Ethan's heart began to race. His fingers hovered above his keyboard, but his mind went blank. He waited, listening for more, but the apartment suddenly grew silent. A moment later, he heard the faint sound of her humming, calm, cheerful, unaware of the chaos she had just stirred inside him. He sat there for several seconds, trying to convince himself that he had misheard her. Maybe it was an inside joke, maybe she was talking about some spa treatment or makeover. But deep inside, he felt that familiar ache, the same uneasy feeling that had been building for weeks. When Sophie finally stepped out of the bedroom, she looked flawless. She smiled at him casually and asked, "Do I look okay?" He forced a smile back, nodding, though his chest felt tight. She leaned down, kissed his cheek, and said she'd be back late. As she left, Ethan stared at the closed door for a long time. The echo of her laughter and that one haunting sentence, "I got a full-body surprise waiting," kept replaying in his head. He didn't know what it meant yet, but something deep inside him whispered that his life was about to change forever. The days following that strange phone call were heavy and restless for Ethan. Every time Sophie's phone buzzed, his heart tensed as if it carried a secret meant to break him. He tried to keep his composure, pretending nothing was wrong, smiling through conversations and continuing his routine as if life were the same. But inside, his thoughts tangled into suspicion and doubt. He started observing her in ways he never had before. Who she texted, how often she smiled at her phone, how quickly she locked the screen when he walked by. Every small detail began to matter. When she mentioned late meetings, he checked the time she returned. Her hugs felt different now, quick and distracted, as if she wanted to keep a distance without making it obvious. Ethan found himself overthinking every movement, every word. The warmth between them was fading, replaced by a silence that pressed down harder each night. When she sat beside him on the couch, scrolling through her phone, he no longer felt connected. He wanted to ask her about that night, about the words he'd overheard, but fear held him back. He didn't want to sound paranoid, or worse, right? A few days later, while having breakfast, Ethan casually asked about the show she had attended. Sophie looked up with a bright smile, her voice too cheerful, too rehearsed. "It was amazing," she said, stirring her coffee. "Oh, really? What kind of show is it again?" he asked lightly. She paused for a moment, then laughed. "You wouldn't have liked it anyway." That was it. No photos, no details, no names of friends who went with her, just that dismissive line followed by a quick change of subject. It was unlike her. Sophie usually shared everything, selfies, stories, funny things that happened. Now, there was only silence and vague answers. As the week went on, Ethan's gut feeling deepened into certainty. One night, as Sophie tossed her clothes into the laundry basket, a familiar yet foreign scent drifted toward him. It wasn't her usual perfume. This one was muskier, more masculine, clinging to her jacket like a memory that refused to fade. He picked up the fabric after she left the room, bringing it closer. The scent struck him, strong, distinct, unmistakably not hers. His stomach twisted. He dropped the jacket back into the basket, staring at it as if it could give him answers. The apartment suddenly felt too quiet, too empty, as though trust itself had left the room. In that silence, one truth began to echo in his mind, the voice he'd heard that night, the laughter, the full-body surprise. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't paranoia. Something was definitely wrong, and Sophie was hiding it. But Ethan wasn't ready to confront her yet. Not without proof. Not until he knew exactly what kind of secret his girlfriend was keeping from him. Ethan couldn't hold the storm inside him any longer. The sleepless nights, the endless overthinking, the flashes of doubt had begun to eat away at his peace. Every time he looked at Sophie, 1,000 questions ran through his mind, but his lips stayed sealed. He needed someone to talk to, someone who would tell him the truth, not just what he wanted to hear. That weekend, he met his best friend Liam at their usual spot, a quiet bar near the old town square. Liam was the kind of friend everyone wished they had, straightforward, loyal, and brutally honest. As a police officer, he had a natural instinct for lies and half-truths, something Ethan hoped could help him make sense of his confusion. They sat at a corner table with cold beers in hand. For a few minutes, Ethan avoided the subject, talking about work and the usual things. But eventually, the weight became too much to hide. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Liam, can I tell you something that's been messing with my head?" Liam leaned back in his chair, nodding. "You look like you haven't slept in days. What's going on?" Ethan hesitated for a moment before speaking. "It's Sophie. The other night, before going out with her friends, I heard her talking on the phone. She was laughing, flirting, and then she said something weird. He swallowed hard, his voice trembling slightly. She said, "I got a full-body surprise waiting." Liam raised an eyebrow, the seriousness in his eyes replacing the casual calm. "Full-body surprise?" he repeated slowly. "That doesn't sound innocent." "I know," Ethan said quickly, "but I don't want to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was some inside joke, or she meant something harmless. Maybe I'm just being paranoid." Liam stayed silent for a moment, watching his friend struggle between hope and fear. Then, in his steady, firm voice, he said, "Ethan, you already know the truth. You just don't want to believe it. People don't hide what's innocent. If it bothers you this much, it's because something's not right. But don't assume, get proof. If she's lying, you'll see it. And if she's not, you'll finally have peace." The words hit Ethan harder than he expected. Proof. That was what he needed, not guesses, not suspicion. Something undeniable. They sat in silence for a while, both staring at their glasses. The sound of soft music filled the background, but Ethan's mind was somewhere else. He thought about Sophie's laughter, her perfume, the way she brushed off his questions. Maybe Liam was right. Maybe he was ignoring what was already in front of him. Still, part of him clung to hope, the part that remembered their first date, the nights they stayed up talking until sunrise, the love that once felt unshakable. As he drove home that night, his thoughts wrestled between love and logic. Could he really believe Sophie would betray him? Could he face the truth if she did? He didn't know. But one thing was clear. Something deep inside him refused to rest until he found out what that full-body surprise really meant. The following weekend arrived with an air of uneasy calm. Sophie was in a cheerful mood again, humming softly as she packed her purse and touched up her makeup in the hallway mirror. She mentioned casually that she'd be going out with the girls again, another night of laughter, drinks, and fun. Ethan's chest tightened at the words, but he kept his expression relaxed. He didn't want to reveal what was going through his mind. Instead, he smiled faintly and said, "Sounds fun. Want me to drop you off?" Sophie froze for just a fraction of a second. A pause so brief most people would have missed it, but not Ethan. That hesitation was louder than any confession. She quickly forced a smile and waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, no need. I already told them I'd meet them there. I'll just Uber." Her tone was light, but her eyes darted away as she spoke. Ethan caught it, that small flicker of unease that confirmed what his gut had been whispering all along. He nodded slowly, pretending to accept it. "All right," he said softly. "Have fun, then." She leaned down, kissed his cheek, and left, the familiar scent of her new perfume lingering in the air like a warning. The sound of the door closing behind her filled the apartment with heavy silence. Ethan sat on the couch, staring at the blank TV screen for a long minute. His heart beat steadily, not out of fear this time, but determination. Liam's words echoed in his mind, "Get proof." Taking a deep breath, he picked up his phone and opened the Find My app. It was something they had set up years ago, back when their love still felt innocent, when they trusted each other without question. It was meant for safety, to know the other was safe when traveling or driving late at night. Now, that same feature would reveal a truth he wasn't sure he wanted to see. Her location pin blinked on the map. At first, Ethan expected it to show a familiar place, a restaurant, a friend's apartment, maybe even a concert venue like she had mentioned before. But as the map loaded fully, his stomach dropped. The pin wasn't anywhere near the downtown area or her usual spots. It was several miles away, on the edge of the city, a quiet area lined with industrial buildings and a few motels. The name of the location appeared on the screen like a slap across the face. The Willow Crest Hotel. Ethan stared at it in disbelief. His throat went dry, his mind spinning. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe one of her friends was staying there. Maybe. But no. Deep down, he knew. The tiny pause when he offered her a ride, the way she laughed too lightly, the secretive smiles she'd been giving her phone, it all connected now. He sat there for a while, phone clutched in his hand, trying to process what to do next. A mix of anger, sadness, and confusion flooded through him. He didn't want to believe it, but denial no longer felt possible. He zoomed in on the map again, watching the little blue dot move slightly. She was there inside that hotel. The image of her walking through those doors with someone else burned into his mind, even though he hadn't seen it happen. Ethan leaned back on the couch, closing his eyes for a moment. His world, once filled with love and trust, now felt fragile, as if one more truth could make it collapse entirely. He knew this wasn't the end. The hotel was just the beginning of the truth he was about to uncover. Ethan's breath came in short, uneven waves as he stared at the small blinking dot on his phone screen. It hadn't moved for several minutes, still fixed at the Willow Crest Hotel. A part of him wanted to ignore it, to shut the app and pretend he'd never looked, but another part, the part that refused to live in uncertainty any longer, told him that the truth had to be seen, no matter how much it hurt. He grabbed his car keys, slipped on his jacket, and stepped into the cold night air. The drive to the hotel felt endless. Every red light seemed to stretch for hours, each passing car a reminder of what he might be about to discover. His palms were slick with sweat, and his hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. He replayed memories of Sophie in his mind, her laughter, their morning routines, the plans they once made together. None of it made sense anymore. When he finally pulled into the parking lot of the hotel, his heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might break through his chest. The glowing sign of the Willow Crest Hotel loomed ahead, quiet and almost mocking in its calmness. Ethan parked near the edge of the lot, far enough to remain unseen, and sat in silence, his engine off, his headlights dimmed. For 30 agonizing minutes, he stayed there, staring at the entrance, watching strangers come and go. Every time the lobby doors opened, his pulse jumped, half expecting her to appear. He questioned himself 100 times in that half hour. What if he was wrong? What if Sophie really was meeting friends? What if he was about to destroy their relationship over nothing? But just as doubt began to creep in, the hotel doors slid open, and there she was. Sophie stepped out of a dark car, her hair loose, her dress the same one she'd worn earlier. Her face glowed with excitement as she laughed at something the man beside her said. Ethan's heart sank the instant he saw him. A tall man in a leather jacket, confident, relaxed, and far too familiar with her. The man placed his hand gently on Sophie's waist as they walked together, their bodies close, their steps perfectly in sync. Sophie leaned into him naturally, the kind of closeness that comes only from intimacy. The way she looked at him, the way her eyes sparkled, was a look Ethan hadn't seen directed at him in months. He froze, unable to breathe. His body went numb while his mind screamed in disbelief. It was one thing to suspect betrayal, but another to see it with his own eyes. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. It felt like my chest had caved in. The pain was sharp, almost physical, radiating through his chest and down to his fingertips. His hands tightened around his phone, his knuckles turning white. He wanted to run to them, to demand an explanation, to shout at the man touching the woman he loved. But something stronger held him back, a strange calm, the quiet of devastation. He raised his phone with trembling hands and took a few photos, each click of the camera like a stab to the heart. The flash was off. They never noticed him. He watched as Sophie and the man disappeared through the glass doors, laughing as if the world belonged to them. Ethan stayed in the car long after they vanished inside, staring blankly at the hotel entrance. His mind felt detached from his body, floating somewhere between anger and heartbreak. Tears finally began to blur his vision, spilling down his face silently. He didn't know how long he sat there, but eventually he started the engine and drove away. The road home was a blur of city lights and emotionless silence. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, his tears falling freely now. Every mile felt heavier than the last, the weight of betrayal pressing against his chest. When he finally reached his apartment, he parked the car and just sat there for a while, staring at nothing. The images replayed in his mind, her laughter, the touch, the way she looked at that man. Without a word, he unlocked his phone, stared at the pictures for a few seconds, then turned off the screen. He couldn't bear to look any longer. That night, Ethan lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wide awake. The house felt colder than ever before, the silence almost cruel. He realized that something inside him had broken, something that might never fully heal. The truth was out there now, undeniable, painful, and real. And though Sophie didn't know it yet, their relationship had already ended the moment he saw her walk through those hotel doors. Sophie came home late that night, her perfume still lingering, different from the one Ethan remembered, sharper and more expensive. She slipped through the door quietly, trying to mask her nervous energy with a tired smile. "Hey, babe," she said softly, pretending exhaustion. "The show ran long. You'd have been bored." Ethan looked up from the couch, where he'd been sitting in the dim glow of the TV. His expression was unreadable, calm to the point of chilling. "That's so," he said, voice steady, almost gentle. She kissed his cheek quickly, perhaps too quickly. Her eyes darted away as she mumbled something about needing a shower. Ethan nodded, forcing a faint smile.
"Sure. Go ahead," he said.
Inside, his heart ached, but his mind was already detached, cold, methodical, waiting. The next morning, Ethan made breakfast like he always did. Pancakes, eggs, coffee. He greeted her with warmth that felt hollow. When Sophie walked into the kitchen, wrapped in her robe, her hair damp from a shower, she seemed extra cheerful. Overcompensating, maybe. She hugged him from behind, whispering, "You're too good to me." Ethan's lips twitched in what looked like a smile, though his eyes remained lifeless. "Peaceful night," he said softly, flipping a pancake. "Just how I like it." The words made her pause, but only for a second. She brushed it off, kissed him again, and went about her morning. Ethan watched her quietly. Every movement, every glance, every excuse. He no longer reacted emotionally, no anger, no confrontation. Just silent observation. He noticed the small details now. Her phone was always face down on the table. She smiled at messages, but never shared the sender. Her work meetings stretched later into the night. Her perfume changed again midweek. Each lie layered itself over the last, forming a pattern so clear it almost fascinated him. He began to understand that Sophie wasn't just hiding something, she was living a double life, one that had slowly replaced the love they once shared. Still, Ethan stayed quiet. He helped her with dinner, watched movies beside her, listened as she described imaginary outings with her friends. Every time she spoke, he studied her tone, her eyes, the tremor in her laughter. There were moments when she'd rest her head on his shoulder, and he'd wonder how someone could lie so gently, so easily. His silence became a mirror she couldn't read. She started to grow uneasy, sensing a shift she couldn't name. "You've been quiet lately," she said one evening, her voice laced with nervous curiosity. Ethan looked up, meeting her gaze. "Just thinking," he replied, "about how peace can be such a rare thing." She laughed softly, unsure how to respond. The tension in the air thickened like fog, unspoken, heavy, electric. For the next week, Ethan's calm became her storm. Every day, he said less, but his eyes said more. His restraint wasn't forgiveness, it was strategy. He wanted to understand not just what she'd done, but why. He gathered small clues quietly. Credit card receipts tucked in her purse, hotel loyalty points in her email, a message preview from someone named M. And with each discovery, Ethan's resolve hardened. He no longer wanted a confrontation born of rage. He wanted the truth, clean, undeniable, and final. Because he knew that when the storm finally came, it wouldn't be loud, it would be cold, precise, and unforgettable. The following Friday came wrapped in quiet tension. Sophie announced she was heading out again, her tone rehearsed, her smile too polished. "There's another show tonight," she said casually, slipping on her heels. "You don't mind, right?" Ethan smiled faintly, shaking his head. "Of course not. You deserve a break. Have fun." Inside, his pulse was steady, but his thoughts were razor-sharp. He had already planned every move. That morning, while she was in the shower, he had prepared a small, subtle test, a way to uncover the truth once and for all. Before she left, as Sophie rummaged through her purse, Ethan pretended to hand her a packet of gum. In the same motion, he slipped a tiny voice recorder into the inner pocket, a leftover gadget from one of his old freelance projects. Small, discreet, nearly undetectable. Sophie kissed his cheek lightly before walking out the door. "Don't wait up," she said with a grin. "I won't," Ethan replied, his voice even and calm. When the door clicked shut behind her, Ethan exhaled deeply and sank into the couch. The silence of the apartment was deafening. He waited for hours, staring blankly at the TV, pretending to care about whatever was playing. But inside, his heart was a storm, anxious, angry, and yet strangely resolved. 3 hours later, he connected to the recorder remotely. The device was linked through his editing app, a feature meant for wireless syncing of field audio. He hesitated for a moment before pressing play. At first, all he heard was ambient noise, music, faint chatter, the shuffle of footsteps. Then came her voice.
"Sophie."
She was laughing. That familiar, melodic laugh he used to love, now twisted with deceit. And then, a man's voice joined hers. Deep, confident, unmistakably the same one from the hotel. "Missed you, babe," the man said. Sophie giggled, her tone flirty, intimate. "I told Ethan it's just a girl's night. He's so gullible." Ethan's stomach tightened. His breath caught somewhere between disbelief and rage. But the recording continued. Her voice grew softer, almost seductive. "You'll love the surprise. It's a full-body massage and more." Ethan froze. His entire world collapsed into that one moment, those few words that erased 3 years of love and trust. The sound of her laughter cut through him like glass. He paused the playback, his finger trembling. He couldn't listen any further. For a long time, he just sat there, staring into the dark, the quiet hum of the city leaking in through the window. Every sound, every memory, felt distant now, as if he was no longer part of his own life. The truth wasn't just confirmed. It was recorded, preserved, undeniable. Ethan closed his laptop slowly, his face calm but pale, his eyes hollow. He whispered to himself, "Now I know." There was no rage, no shouting, no tears. Just silence, the kind that comes after something inside you breaks for good. He knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of what came next. It was just past midnight when Sophie finally came home. The apartment was dark except for the faint glow of a lamp in the corner. Ethan sat quietly on the couch, his elbows resting on his knees, hands clasped together, eyes fixed on the floor. The air felt thick, heavy with something unspoken. Sophie closed the door gently, setting her purse down. "Hey," she said with a nervous little laugh, glancing around. "Why are the lights so dim? You scared me for a second." Ethan looked up slowly, his expression unreadable. "Just thinking," he said softly. I used to think surprises were a good thing. But yours," he paused, letting the silence hang, "wasn't." Her smile faded instantly. "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone cautious, her hands fidgeting. Ethan reached for his phone and pressed play. Her own voice filled the room, laughter, flirtation, and then the sentence that shattered everything. "I told Ethan it's just a girl's night. He's so gullible. You'll love the surprise. It's a full-body massage and more." Sophie froze. The color drained from her face. Her eyes widened in horror as she realized exactly what he'd done, and what he knew. "Ethan?" she stammered, her voice cracking. "It's not what it sounds like. I can explain, I swear."
He didn't speak.
He just opened a folder on his phone and held it up, photos of her at the hotel, walking arm in arm with a man in the leather jacket. The silence that followed was unbearable. Sophie's breath hitched. Her hands trembled as tears welled in her eyes. "Please," she whispered. "It didn't mean anything. It was just fun, a stupid mistake." Ethan stood slowly, his gaze steady, his tone quiet but sharp. "You giggled," he said. "And you said you had a full-body surprise waiting. You were right. The surprise was finding out who you really are." Her knees weakened. She covered her face, sobbing uncontrollably. Ethan, please, I love you. I messed up. I'll fix this. I'll do anything. But Ethan just looked at her, not with anger, but with a kind of heartbreaking clarity. The kind that comes when love dies quietly, replaced by truth. He walked past her toward the bedroom, pulling a suitcase from the closet. Each movement was deliberate, emotionless. Sophie tried to grab his arm, but he gently pulled away. Don't, he said firmly, his voice calm but final. You made your choice. I'm just making mine. She collapsed onto the floor, her sobs echoing through the dim apartment. Ethan didn't look back. He packed in silence, his mind oddly clear. For him, there were no more words to say, no fight left to give, no forgiveness to offer. When he finally walked to the door, Sophie whispered behind him, "Please say something." Ethan paused for a moment, his hand on the doorknob. Then, without turning around, he said quietly, "Sometimes silence says it all." And with that, he left, closing the door on 3 years of love, lies, and the woman he thought he knew. By morning, the apartment looked different. Emptier, colder, stripped of warmth. Ethan packed quietly as dawn crept through the curtains. He didn't take much, just clothes, his laptop, a few personal things. He paused once, looking around the living room where so many memories were made, laughter over dinner, lazy Sunday mornings, whispered dreams about the future. Now it all felt hollow. He placed a handwritten note on the kitchen counter, next to Sophie's favorite mug. The message was simple, clean, final. I loved you enough to trust you. You loved yourself enough to destroy that. He locked the door behind him without looking back. The first few days were a blur, sleepless nights, cold meals, and an empty apartment that didn't feel like home. He buried himself in work, taking on extra design projects, losing track of time. The silence that once haunted him slowly became his peace. There were moments, though, flashes of memory that caught him off guard. The way she used to smile across the table. The way she'd fall asleep on his shoulder during movies. Those memories came like ghosts, uninvited, painful, but fading with each passing week. He realized the hardest part wasn't losing her. It was losing the version of her he thought was real. Weeks passed, and the pain began to dull. The anger, once burning hot, cooled into quiet understanding. He started jogging in the mornings again, rediscovering his rhythm. He spent weekends visiting his parents, reconnecting with old friends. And slowly he began to heal. In quiet moments, Ethan would reflect on everything that happened. He understood now that truth doesn't always arrive gently. Sometimes it breaks you before it frees you. He learned that love without honesty is a slow poison. That silence, though painful, can be more powerful than revenge. Meanwhile, Sophie tried reaching out again and again, texts, voicemails, long emails filled with apologies and regret. She said she missed him, that it was a mistake, that she still loved him. Ethan never replied. Not out of spite, but because he had nothing left to say. Some doors, once closed, aren't meant to open again. One evening, sitting by his apartment window, Ethan watched the city lights flicker against the dark. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight on his chest finally lift. He whispered to himself, almost like a promise, "Next time, I'll love without losing myself." And for the first time in a long while, he smiled, not because he'd forgotten her, but because he finally remembered who he was before her. A month later, Ethan had begun to find his balance again. His days were steady, predictable, work, gym, quiet evenings at home. The wounds were healing, though the scars still pulsed in quiet moments. Then, one evening, as he was finishing a design project, an unexpected email appeared in his inbox. No name, no message, just a single video attachment titled, "You should see this." Curiosity flickered, followed by caution. After a few seconds of hesitation, Ethan clicked play. The video opened with shaky footage, clearly recorded secretly on a phone. It showed a man and a woman standing outside what looked like a restaurant parking lot. As the camera zoomed in, Ethan's stomach turned. The man was familiar. The same leather jacket, the same confident smirk. The same man Sophie had betrayed him with. But this time, the scene was different. The woman in the video, someone Ethan didn't recognize, was shouting furiously, her voice trembling with rage. "You lied to her too, didn't you?" she yelled, before slapping him hard across the face. The sound cracked through the night. The man tried to defend himself, his voice muffled. "It wasn't serious." "Not serious?" she screamed. "You told me you broke up with her. You said you were single." The confrontation grew heated, raw, painful to watch. People nearby turned their heads as the argument escalated. Eventually, the woman stormed off, leaving the man standing there, exposed, humiliated. Ethan sat frozen, watching until the screen faded to black. He didn't know who had sent it, but the message was clear. The man Sophie had risked everything for was a serial liar, a manipulator who had played her the same way she had played him. For a long moment, Ethan didn't move. The irony was cruel and sharp. Sophie, once the betrayer, had now become the betrayed. He thought about her tears the night he left, her endless calls afterward, her desperate apologies. Somewhere out there, she was probably facing the same heartbreak she had caused. But Ethan felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a quiet, heavy pity. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the darkened screen, and whispered under his breath, "Karma doesn't always need witnesses." For the first time, he understood what closure really meant. Not revenge, not validation, but peace. He deleted the email, closed his laptop, and walked out onto the balcony. The night air was cool, the city calm. Somewhere below, life went on, noisy, messy, beautiful. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past finally dissolve into silence. He didn't need to watch karma unfold. It already had. Months passed, and the ache that once consumed Ethan had softened into something else, perspective. The storm that had torn through his life was now a memory, a painful but necessary chapter. He had stopped replaying the past, stopped searching for reasons, and started rebuilding himself piece by piece. One afternoon, Liam called him about an upcoming reunion, a casual get-together with old friends. Ethan hesitated at first, but eventually agreed. It felt like time to rejoin the world again. The night of the reunion, laughter and music filled the small rooftop bar. Familiar faces, warm greetings, and the comfort of old friendships surrounded him. For the first time in a long while, Ethan laughed without pretending. At one point, as the group shared stories over drinks, Liam asked quietly, "You ever think about her?" Ethan paused, then smiled faintly.
"Sometimes," he said.
"But not the way I used to." Curiosity flickered in their friend's eyes, and Ethan decided to share his story. Not to vent, not to gain sympathy, but to share the truth he had earned the hard way. He spoke calmly, his tone thoughtful. "You know," he began, "sometimes what you hear in passing reveals everything you refuse to see. I ignored the signs because I loved her, because I wanted to believe the best. But love without honesty isn't love at all. It's just denial wrapped in hope." The group fell silent listening. There was no bitterness in his voice, just quiet wisdom. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned, Ethan found himself talking to someone new, Clara. She was different from Sophie, in every way. Soft-spoken, grounded, with a calm presence that didn't demand attention but earned it effortlessly. They talked for hours, not about the past, but about life, music, books, and small things that made them both smile. There were no games, no pretense, just honesty. Ethan found it refreshing, almost healing. Over the next few months, their connection grew slowly, naturally. Clara didn't try to fix him. She just understood him. And in that understanding, Ethan rediscovered something he thought he'd lost: trust. He learned to open up again, to laugh freely, to believe that love could still exist without lies. One evening, as they watched the sunset together, Ethan reflected quietly. The wounds had healed, but the lesson remained, etched deep, like a scar that reminds you where you've been. He turned to Clara and smiled, his voice low and sincere. When someone laughs behind closed doors, it's not always joy. Sometimes, it's the echo of betrayal. Clara squeezed his hand gently. And sometimes, she replied, it's the sound of someone finally letting go. Ethan nodded, watching the fading light paint the sky in soft gold. For the first time in a long time, his heart was quiet, not because he'd forgotten the pain, but because he'd learned from it. The past was over, the lesson was clear, and this time, the laughter was real. As the story draws to a close, the narrator's tone softens, reflective, almost poetic, as Ethan's journey settles into meaning. The pain, the discovery, the silence, and the healing all weave together into one truth. Not every ending is tragedy. Some are transformation. The voiceover begins. Love can't survive on words alone. It needs honesty, loyalty, and presence. When laughter turns into secrets, the relationship starts dying quietly. Ethan's story isn't just about betrayal, it's about awakening. It's about realizing that love without truth is a hollow promise, and that no matter how much you give, it's never enough if the other person is wearing a mask. From everything he went through, 3 core lessons emerged, ones he would carry for life. First, trust your intuition. The gut knows long before the heart accepts. What we call paranoia is often just emotional intelligence trying to protect us. Ethan ignored the signs for too long, confusing loyalty with blindness, a mistake he'd never repeat. Second, silence is power. He learned that not every truth needs to be shouted. Revenge might feel satisfying for a moment, but real strength lies in walking away with dignity. Time and truth expose everything more completely than anger ever could. And third, healing begins when you stop chasing closure from those who broke you. Ethan realized that closure doesn't come from apologies or explanations. It comes from acceptance. From the courage to say, this chapter is over, and I'm still standing. The narrator continues, his voice steady but warm. Sometimes the hardest lessons come wrapped in heartbreak. But pain, when faced with grace, becomes wisdom. Ethan didn't lose love. He rediscovered himself. The final image lingers. Ethan walking down a quiet street at sunrise, the city just waking up, a faint smile on his face. The light hits his eyes, soft and new, a symbol of renewal, of peace after the storm. The voice fades out with one last reflection.
People change.
Promises break. But truth always finds its way through. And when it does, it doesn't destroy you. It sets you free. Soft music plays, gentle piano notes mixed with the distant sounds of birds and rustling leaves. The screen opens on Ethan walking through a quiet park at sunrise. The air is crisp, golden light filtering through the trees. He looks peaceful, no bitterness, no weight of the past, just calm acceptance. He pauses by a lake, watching the water ripple as the wind brushes across its surface. For the first time in a long while, his face reflects serenity. He takes a deep breath, eyes closing briefly, as if releasing the last fragments of his pain into the morning air. His phone vibrates in his pocket. He takes it out slowly. The screen lights up with a notification, a message from Sophie. For a moment, he just looks at it, not with anger, not with longing, but with quiet understanding. Then, without hesitation, he swipes it away and deletes it. No reply. No second thoughts. The music swells softly as the camera lingers on his expression, not a smile, but a gentle peace that speaks louder than words. The narrator's voice returns, low and reflective. The full-body surprise wasn't hers. It was mine, the shock of realizing I deserved better. Ethan slips his phone back into his pocket and keeps walking, his silhouette fading into the warm morning light. The world feels new again, open, full of promise. As the music fades, the screen slowly turns black. White text appears, simple but powerful. Sometimes the greatest revenge is peace. The music fades completely. Silence takes over, calm, final, freeing. End scene. Thanks for watching. For more videos, please subscribe our channel. Awesome Visual Story.